Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. In this session, we're going to look at the library for postgraduate students. So if you're a postgraduate student, it's very likely you will live in the library doing all sorts of things there, including in your dressing gown, drinking tea, eating biscuits and all sorts of things, because most students access the library from the comfort of their own home. So I'm joined by Fiona Durham to tell us a little bit about what the library offers and the services and why it's so important for postgraduate students. So thanks for coming along, Fiona. You're an academic liaison librarian and you specialise in supporting education amongst other things as well.
That's right.
So it's great to have you here.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me.
Good. Well, students always like the library services. So let's start with a brief outline then of what the resources are in terms of the training and the stuff that students can get access to. So,
right, so there's two things really. There's the resources, which we have amazing resources for Open University students. We have thousands and thousands of e-books, tens of thousands of e-journals. So the best advice I can give is go and have a play with the library, have a look and see what we've got. We also have things like supporting students with various skills, which you'll also find on the library website. You may possibly be interested in Sconul Access, if you haven't heard of it before, which is a scheme whereby you can join a local academic university library near you, and you will have borrowing rights, and you can also use it as a quiet place to study. So if you're based in the mainland UK, your local library, university, for example, in Manchester or Birmingham or Newcastle, you may actually be able to go and use their facilities. So that's a really useful thing at postgraduate level, to have a nice place to go and work.
Now, what's the difference then between undergraduate and postgraduate use of the library? Because I know from many colleagues at other universities, the OU library is really brilliant. There's free access for OU students to a huge range of journal titles, books, all these resources and everything that can cost an absolute fortune. But there's access is all there. So what's the difference then in terms of undergraduate students and postgraduate students?
I think postgraduate students will find that they do a lot more independent research. When you're doing an undergraduate degree, you're very much directed to the kinds of things that your tutors and the module material want you to look at. Whereas you have a bit more freedom at postgraduate level, where you may be choosing a topic or choosing an aspect of a topic, and you're going to be doing a bit more research on that particular topic. And at this stage, you might perhaps want to look at some of the specialist databases that the library has. So, for example, we have a number of education databases. Off the top of my head, there's ERIC, which is the American education database, BEI, the British Education Index. There's the Education Research Complete, which again is a big database of lots of full-text journals. And there's also a really neat database called Sage Research Methods Online. And if you're doing a postgraduate education module, you may very well find that you're linking into bits of Sage Research Methods Online, because they are actually integrated into the module material.
And you don't have to go and buy the books.
You don't have to buy the books, yes, that's right. We spend an enormous amount of money on buying books and journals for OU students, and you're right, they do cost a lot of money, and it's a great opportunity to use them.
Okay.
Another thing that the students might be interested in is the fact that we run training sessions, so helping you get the most out of the library. So we have one which is particularly for level 3 and postgraduate students, called Smarter Searching with Online Databases.
Brilliant.
And the next live one is on Thursday the 17th of October.
Brilliant.
But
Excellent.
if you can't make the live session, and if you can, it would be great, because I love doing the live sessions.
Yeah.
It's so much more fun when you can talk to people and ask questions. But if you can't make a live session, then we do actually have recordings of all our library training sessions.
Because I guess one of the key skills now is about how to find the right information in the first place. And then also, I guess, how to evaluate it and consider what it's good for. And when you're doing postgraduate study, I mean, there's so much. You could literally get lost in this rabbit hole of all sorts of interesting things that if you, and I've done it myself, if you aren't focused, everything can be really interesting, especially early on, but not everything is relevant or appropriate.
No, that's right. You're managing a lot more information at postgraduate level. So there are various things you can do to manage your information. You can use tools, you can take notes in a more focused way. And I've got something which I've shamelessly taken from one of the postgraduate social science.
The library.
Shamelessly taken it from one of the postgraduate social science modules, which I thought was really good actually, because it's about focusing how you take your notes and do your reading. So in this particular template that I've borrowed from DD 804, you start by putting the Harvard reference of your reading in, and it's really important when you're managing large amounts of information to keep track of what you've looked at, how you found it, what keywords you used, what databases you searched in. And then once you've actually got your Harvard reference for the reading, whatever it was, then you start looking at, say, the key arguments in the article or the book, the key evidence, key theories, and cases and real-life application. Now, this is just one template for social science students, and it's quite possible that you might want to have different aspects for a postgraduate education module, but the key thing is that when you're doing your reading and you're making your notes and managing your information, is that you're doing it in a more focused way rather than just sort of making little notes on the side if you're highlighting your article or whatever. This way you're actually looking at it and thinking, what am I going to get out of it?
And I really like the way of sectioning things, because very often, in particular when there is a formula for an article, you've got, you know, your abstract and your introduction and your methods, etc. You can read it in a very linear fashion, which is great if it's of interest, but if it's not of interest, for instance, if you're looking for a particular method or a particular theory or something, breaking it down like this is really going to highlight if something's not there and also where it is as well.
That's right, yes. So, and of course, as we know, academic articles can be really dense and not terribly interesting. So if you're sort of reading it with a purpose in mind, then you know that you're eventually going to get to the end of it. And you've got some,
and then if it's relevant, you can read it.
then you've got some relevant information, that's right, yes.
Brilliant. What's on the reverse? Is that something you want to talk about now? Is that
no,
a different one?
that's just the same thing but smaller.
Ah, no good then to us.
When I was getting my prop together, I was thinking, how easy is this going to be to read? And I thought, no, I'm going to have to make it bigger.
Yeah, no, that's always a good thing. Excellent. Okay, now, one of the things that you've sort of mentioned and touched upon is this idea, I guess, of keeping hold of information. So when you find it, you could write it there, and I'd like to talk about the referencing tools as well. But before we do that, one of your top tips that you've told me about before, and I'd like you to share with students, is about Google Scholar and about linking things.
That's right,
because very often you can go and do specific searches, but sometimes if you just want to go and read and find something, you might use Google Scholar, or you might use Google Scholar for different reasons, like to see who's done the best or the most cited thing.
Yes, Google Scholar is a really amazing tool, actually, and I would recommend anybody who's not used it to actually have a look at it. I use it a lot, despite the fact, you know, I'm a librarian and I can use library search and the databases, because I find that I'm very often asked to research something which I may not know a lot about on the library help desk. And a quick search of Google Scholar will always bring something up. Yeah. And once I've actually got one article, even just one article on my topic, it starts to give me things like the keywords, who the key authors in the field might be. So the thing about Google Scholar is it's really big. There's a lot of stuff in it. So it's a good place to start looking for research, actually. So you'll always find something usually on a topic.
But sometimes you find something and then you're like, oh, great. And then it says you've now got to pay £1 million. Not really, but, you know, you've got to then pay to access it.
That's very true, actually. You can link Google Scholar to the library subscriptions.
Right. How do you do that?
So the details are actually on the library website, but there are 3 little dots in the top left-hand corner of Google Scholar, and you just click on those, and then it comes up with something that says various things, including library links.
Right.
And then you just click on that, put Open University into the box that appears, and then that will say you can choose Find It at OU, and then every time you search Google Scholar after that, it will come up with a little thing that says Find It at OU, and if we've paid for it, you can get into it.
Which is very likely.
Yeah.
So that saves that whole thing of then having to do one search, find something great,
and then go back to the library. That's right, yes. Obviously, you know, things being the way we are, we can't possibly pay for everything there is out there in the world. So you very often will find things in Google Scholar that we haven't paid for that you can't get into. But linking it to the library subscriptions does really help.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's brilliant. Now, another way that you've spoken about before that would be really useful to share with students is how to keep hold of that information. And reference management tools are one way not only of keeping the references, but also keeping some of that data together. So when you're finding these great articles and stuff, you're saving them in a way that makes sense. How do they work and what do you recommend students use?
We don't. That's one of the things we always say. We don't recommend a particular tool.
Oh, typical. But there are some, so you can tell us about some of them.
Yes, I can tell you about some of them. Yes, there are lots of freely available ones actually. And I can reel off a few names for you. There's Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote Web, or EndNote Basic as it's sometimes called as well. All those tools are freely available to students to use, and they're a great way of keeping references together. So you build up a kind of library within the tool, and you can add notes to your tool. So, for example, you can have all the details of an article and make little notes and put in really good quotes.
So you could put some of these things on there.
So you could put some of those things in as well. That's right, yes. And the tools also have plugins for Word. So you can actually start outputting things like bibliographies. You can put in-text citations in. Using the tool, and they will automatically create a bibliography.
Ah, very clever. Okay, so it's worth getting to grips with those early on.
Well, it really depends on how you work, because some people prefer card indexes. You know, let's face it, some people prefer card indexes or Word documents. So it really depends on whether you want to put in the effort to learn how to use a reference management tool. It will probably take you 2 or 3 hours to really get the best out of it. Have you used one, Karen?
No. I still write my references out, Fiona, but I have learned to work the computer. But no, I don't. And actually, it is one thing, and I know we've spoken about this many, many times over the years, and I do wish I'd put the time and energy in. But equally now even, I think it is something I should do, because it would make life so much easier as I sit there doing things by hand often. I think there's got to be an easier way. But I think it's one of those things, you know, people of a certain age, like with technology, sometimes there's that thing of trying to use it or not. So, but always I'm a bit like when we were talking before about the time management thing, I just think I can't justify that 3-hour chunk of time, even though I know with hindsight, I've spent 8 hours at least that I could have saved on doing it. So yeah, I'd recommend, don't be like me.
Well, certainly if you find you've got a lot of references, so for example, if you're doing a sort of a project or a dissertation as part of your master's, or indeed a PhD, then I would definitely recommend looking into using one of the tools.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, now there's something else that I'd like to talk about as well, which is the library help desk, which can be very useful. You mentioned sometimes you end up researching areas that you may not know about. Is that when students ask you for help with things?
That's right, yes.
Right, so how does that work?
Well, the thing is, there's a team of librarians who actually work on the library help desk, and we also have library assistants who are the front line actually, and they will triage the questions that come in, and if they think that a librarian's better placed to answer it, like for example for subject inquiries, which are a little bit more tricky, then they'll certainly pass them on to the librarians. And because you're working on a library help desk which is for the whole university, you may well have business students and people who are doing strange things in astronomy and astrophysics, and social scientists. Yes, there's a lot of those.
Lots of them, yeah.
and weird psychological questions as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I very often get asked, you know, what's the best place to look? What keywords do I need, you know, to find some articles or books on my particular topic? So I love working on the library help desk because, you know, you never know what you're going to be asked next. But it's really interesting. And the library help desk is available via web chat, email and phone, and you can find details on every page of the library website on how to contact us. And the web chat is actually 24/7. Yeah. So you can contact the library help desk at 3 o'clock. All the time. At 3 o'clock in the morning if you happen to be working at 3 in the morning. Now, the reason you can do that is not because OU librarians sit up all night waiting for students to contact us. We're actually part of an international cooperative with librarians in the United States. So when they're awake, we're asleep and vice versa. And the American librarians can very often help you with queries about how to find things, how to reference things. They're really very good at that.
Well, we asked people at home, how often have you used the OU library so far? 50% said all the time. so clearly they're in touch a lot. And some people have sometimes, and a few people have rarely used it. But Sandane wants to know whether you need a card to use the library.
No, you don't actually. To use the online library, you only just need your Open University computer username and password.
Great, okay. And I think the people who are rarely using the library are probably the new students who are just getting to grips with the wonderful resources that they've got as well. Okay, so on our resources page on the Student Hub Live website, we've got lots and lots of really good links there that you might like to take a look at, including the library bibliographic management page, library education pages, organising and synthesising information, and the SAGE research methods online that Fiona mentioned as well. You can find out more again on the library tab as well about the events that you've got coming up. So that one you mentioned on the 17th of October would be good. There's other things as well.
Yes, there are other training sessions we do too. So we've got how to use library search if you're new to the university and you want to. In fact, I was just running one on library search last night. So, but there will be another one coming up soon
because they're really nice sessions.
Oh, they're really, we like them too actually, because the students are just so enthusiastic, and you know they've just started a lot of them, and they're really pleased to be in the room, and they want to know all sorts of things, and they're really quite excited at the kind of stuff they can find in the library as well.
Oh, brilliant! Well, Fiona, thank you so much for coming along. You've given us heaps of information here, and it's a really, really great resource. And the other thing I like is that you guys are so friendly and approachable. And so many students love dealing with the library, and I can see why. So thank you very much for coming along.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, good. Our next section is going to be about taught postgraduate studies. So if you're a postgraduate student, or even if you're not and you're interested in postgraduate studies, stay tuned for this. But we're going to show you some more of the campus tour videos as well. I'll be back for our next session in just a few minutes. See you then.